Hello, my dear friends. It's astonishing how each day begins with bombings in Ukrainian cities, especially the capital, Kyiv. Just after Trump's victory in the U.S. elections, Kyiv was hit by a massive drone attack early this morning. The team mentioned it might not be a coincidence, don't you think so? I think Russia seized the moment to put even more pressure on the West, making that well-known speech that support for the Ukrainian government needs to stop to save the people of Ukraine. So, is he right, or is it just rhetoric somewhat distorted from reality? Well, we started this attack with that sound that unfortunately has already become familiar to the residents of Kyiv. The Iranian-made Sharon drones that cut the city's sky, which was still dark. There were reports from residents that they woke up around 6 a.m. to the sound of machine guns and explosions. The Ukrainian air defense was trying to intercept these drones, and it was no less than 8 hours of tension. The mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, said that 5 districts of the city were directly affected. According to him, about 30 drones were shot down, but the wreckage, always wreckage, fell under buildings, causing fires, breaking windows, and injuring at least one person. Yeah, but Kyiv wasn't the only city to feel the impact. In addition to the capital, other Ukrainian regions such as Odessa, Kherson, and Sumy were also targets of airstrikes in Kherson. Unfortunately, 2 people lost their lives. Now wise. The important point here is to understand the message that Moscow is sending with this type of action. And this is where the question of American policy comes in. Trump's victory raises a lot of questions. Will he maintain military support to Ukraine? Some analysts believe that if Trump decides to reduce or even end this aid, Kyiv will find itself in an even more complicated situation on the battlefield. Maiden has already said that it is Ukraine that should have the autonomy to decide the right moment to negotiate. And Zelenskyy has even started the strategic dialogue movement. He even shared on social media that he had a positive conversation with Trump, congratulating him on the historic and decisive victory. According to Zelenskyy, both agreed to maintain a close dialogue channel, and he even stated that United States leadership is essential to achieving a just peace. It's more on the Russian side. Also speaking out was Sergei Shoigu, who now holds the position of Secretary of the Russian Security Council. Shoigu, who, as you remember, was defense minister, made some strong statements directed at the West. He said the West needs to accept that Russia is winning the war in Ukraine, and that it is time to negotiate to end the conflict. Along these lines, he argued that the United States and its allies tried to use Ukraine to strategically weaken Russia, but that, according to him, this plan did not work. Now let's look at Shoigu's rhetorical strategy. It puts the West before a difficult choice. In his view, Western countries need to decide whether they will continue financing Kyiv at the cost he emphasizes of destroying the Ukrainian population, or whether they will accept the current reality and seek negotiation. He even goes further and characterizes the Ukrainian government as ... manipulated by outside powers. This has serious implications for any possible peace agreement. The implicit suggestion, and sometimes even explicit, it is that Moscow would only accept an agreement with the removal of Zelenskyy from power. Well, we remember, of course, that this is not a new demand, right? They have already emphasized enough that Zelenskyy only remains in power as long as the war exists, and this is due to the fact that his mandate has already ended and there have been no new elections. Of course, this line of argument of the Kremlin is aligned with its territorial claims. Since 2022, Russia has officially annexed 4 Ukrainian regions: domestic Luhansk, Polis, and Kherson. However, as we know, it is important to always remember this. Moscow does not fully control all these areas. Just as an example, only Luhansk is fully under Russian control. This indicates that in any future negotiations, Russia is likely to demand additional concessions, and perhaps the most important point of all, for Moscow, ensuring that Ukraine remains outside NATO. Now, on the Ukrainian side, Zelenskyy made an important diplomatic move by visiting Hungary. The meeting took place during a European Community Summit, and Zelenskyy had the chance to dialogue directly with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. He has a stance considered pro-Kremlin, and with Charles Michel, the President of the European Council. This Zelenskyy move is a clear attempt to strengthen Ukraine's ties with the European Union, especially at a time when U.S. support may become less assured under the Trump administration. After all, if the new American administration really decides to reduce support, Ukraine will need to strengthen its ties with European allies so as not to lose strength in its defense. And as I said yesterday, Europe has neither the financial nor the political conditions to bear alone the investments necessary to maintain this war of attrition. However, folks, in the very short term, maybe Ukraine can still have some hope. Well, I say this because with little time left before Biden leaves office, he plans to send billions of dollars in security assistance to Ukraine. The idea is simple and straightforward: to ensure that the Ukrainian government is in the strongest possible position before Donald Trump assumes the presidency on January 20th. Now, you may be wondering, what's all the rush? It is no news to anyone that Trump has been a fierce critic of Biden's aid to Ukraine. This has generated enormous fear about the future of this support, and especially if we take into account that the White House, Senate, and possibly House of Representatives will be under Republican control. It's one of those shifts of scenery that strengthens Trump's personal power. Since January 2023, the House has been controlled by Republicans, but after Tuesday's elections, we still don't know for sure whether they maintained that lead or whether the Democrats were able to regain a small majority. Does it matter? Yeah, sure. The last time the Republican-controlled House approved military aid to Ukraine was in April of this year, when Biden requested more resources. Oh, interestingly, this aid was only approved with the support of more Democrats than Republicans. At the moment, there are still $4.3 billion left of this transfer authorization, in addition to another $2.8 billion authorized in previous measures, and another $2 billion destined to purchase new weapons directly from the industry. In total, guys, there are $9 billion in military assistance, which would be quite a reinforcement for the Ukrainian forces at this critical moment in which they are living now. Let's open a parenthesis just to talk about the weapons involved in this. Helps and includes ammunition and anti-tank weapons, such as the well-known Javelin missiles from Lockheed Martin and RTX, as well as land vehicles and 155mm artillery manufactured by General Dynamics, and we cannot forget the famous GMLRS rockets, which are launched by RIMAS systems and are very useful on the Ukrainian front line. But will this support be maintained? That's where it gets complicated. Some believe that if Trump in the White House has a divided Congress, new aid packages for Ukraine could face considerable resistance. Scott Anderson of the Book Institution commented that there will be serious challenges when the need for additional funding for Ukraine arises. And it seems that the Senate leadership avoided commenting on the matter at a press conference, preferring to focus only on the electoral results. Interestingly, during the campaign, Trump did not spare bold statements. He insists that Putin would never have invaded Ukraine if he were in office. And in one of these speeches, he stated that he would resolve the situation within 24 hours. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, he has suggested in previous interviews that Ukraine may need to cede territory to reach a peace agreement, an idea that, as we know, both Biden and the Ukrainian government have rejected. And if people weren't enough, all this uncertainty, we have the Vice President-elect, who is an outspoken critic of support for Ukraine. For him, resources should be redirected to domestic priorities of the United States, such as border security to stop illegal immigration. So what do you think? Will support for Ukraine wane, or will Trump surprise and maintain a line of help, albeit perhaps more moderate? Yes, my friends. What about China, huh? How will the already tense relationship between the United States and Beijing become? Well, Xi Jinping has already congratulated Donald Trump on the victory and, like someone sending a diplomatic message, asked that the two nations find the right way to understand each other. This speech comes at a delicate time, with the shadow of U.S. tariffs looming on the horizon and threatening to reignite the trade war that marked the relationship between the two countries years ago. Xi Jinping said that a stable, solid, and sustainable relationship between China and the United States is in the interests of both sides, and also said that the international community expects the two countries to respect each other and coexist peacefully. All right, guys. In practical terms, he is asking for more dialogue to try to manage differences in the most appropriate way possible, without partiality. And for the confrontation, if we look back, it is visible how this relationship has had slightly better moments. It has reached a tipping point with disputes ranging from trade and security issues to sensitive topics such as the future of Taiwan and territorial disputes in the South China Sea. In recent times, these tensions have begun to ease somewhat, especially after a 4-hour meeting between Xi and Biden in California in November 2023. But since then, there has been no shortage of situations of the two countries wearing tight t-shirts, showing off their muscles, if you know what I mean. Military exercise there, military exercise here. So what does Trump's victory mean? Well, he has already made it clear that he intends to adopt heavy tariffs against China. A kind of review of the spirit of his first presidency, when he started a trade war with Beijing in 2018. At the time, you may remember, he implemented a series of tariffs on Chinese products, and the conflict was only eased on the eve of the COVID-19 pandemic in January 2020. Now, with Trump back, expectations of a resumption of this economic conflict are very real. I think it's interesting to note, folks, that the tone of steam this time was more restrained than in Trump's first election in 2016. At that time, Tim spoke of major breakthroughs in China-US relations from a new starting point, suggesting that the two economies should take responsibility with regard to global development, global prosperity, and prosperity. But now the message was more pragmatic, without too many illusions, perhaps reflecting the experiences accumulated in recent years. Yeah, but his state-run China newspaper, in an editorial, brought a slightly different perspective. They described this second Trump presidency as a new opportunity in China-United States relations, if this chance is not squandered. The central idea of the editorial is that a pragmatic approach to bilateral relations is fundamental to facing global challenges. It's a subtle way of saying that any unnecessary confrontation would only complicate an already complex scenario. Still along these lines, I think Europe will have to rethink its relationship with the United States, at least the way it relates. Just imagine the climate in the old continent after Trump's victory. While most European leaders are worried, Viktor Orban, the nationalist leader of Hungary, is having a real party, laughing to himself. Shortly after Trump declared victory, Orban wrote on social media, "A much-needed victory for the world. This reaction is not accidental, folks. Orban hopes his close friendship with Trump will strengthen his position in an increasingly politically divided Europe." Orban hopes his close friendship with Trump will strengthen his position in an increasingly politically charged Europe and also give a boost to his far-right allies at a time when he faces major domestic challenges. And look, he had a standout moment. He hosted a summit in Budapest with several European leaders, some of whom are concerned about what a Trump victory could mean for Ukraine, NATO, and global trade. As we know, Orban has a controversial stance within the European Union, with its links to Russia and its opposition to sending military aid to Ukraine. He always praises Trump as a man of peace who, he says, would quickly end the war. Last night, Orban and Trump had a phone conversation, and the Hungarian leader wasted no time, soon published on the networks that they have big plans for the future. And what would be Orban's role in this context? Well, it is. He wants to position himself as a mediator between Washington and Europe, something that could reduce his isolation within the European Union. Do you remember Orban's peace mission, which caused embarrassment to EU leaders when he visited Moscow and Kyiv in July without officially informing the EU or NATO? He even ended this mission with a visit to Trump at Mar-a-Lago, where he declared that Trump would act as a peace mediator immediately after winning the elections. It's the first part of his prophecy fulfilled. Now let's look at the second one. But is the European Union willing to leave Orban and lead the discussions on security or Ukraine? Well, it's a very interesting dilemma. At the same time, he's seen as a problematic figure. Trump's threat to impose a 10% tariff on all imports may make Europeans wish Orban had some weight in trade talks. If Trump returns, Orban believes Europe will need to rethink its strategy towards Ukraine. What about Trump? Well, he once said he could end the war in 24 hours, but he never made it clear how he would do it. This is where Urban sees an opportunity. He wants to be seen as an important negotiator, someone who, with this new Trump era, can gain much more influence. At the same time, Urban faces important challenges in Hungary. His economy has stagnated and a new opposition party has gained strength, threatening his long leadership. Trump's return could, in the view of some analysts, alleviate the pressure that Washington exerted on Orbán on issues such as press freedom and customs. Relations between Budapest and Washington cooled over Biden, especially due to Orbán's links to Moscow and the delay in approving Sweden's entry into NATO. But not everything is cause for celebration for Orbán, as there is a negative side to this rapprochement with Trump, the new American president's trade policy. Trump has already promised tariffs of 10% on imports from all countries and 60% on products from China. This could greatly impact the Hungarian economy, which depends heavily on the automotive industry. Just to give you an idea, in 2021, the automotive sector represented 12.3% of manufacturing jobs in Hungary. And look, companies like Estelante and the Chinese BID have factories in the country. Peter Virovax, economist at NG, commented that this new Trump 2.0 era could bring serious problems for European industry, and Orbán knows it. He is in a very delicate position, trying to balance his plans with the possible economic consequences of Trump's policies. Yeah, but being friends with someone who rates can bring more advantages than not being. We're done here. If this video is useful to you, make a comment, share your social networks, give a like, and of course, if you are not already subscribed, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so as not to miss the next videos. Okay, everybody, a big hug from Professor Aaron Alves.